Hi, my name is Sarah, and today I'm going to talk to you about our line of Ritual by Mayco products, specifically our Melt Gloop product. They are a little different than any standard glaze you're going to use, so I just want to go over some basics of how to apply them and how they're going to fire for you guys. Our Melt Gloop line of products, they have a firing range from cone 5 to 10. You want to keep in mind that if you are going to fire to a higher temperature, you may increase the fluidity of this glaze. So you may have dots that tend to flatten out a little bit more, or if you are applying a larger quantity of the glaze for drips, you may see more run the higher you go in temperature. Mayco recommends that you do your own testing on your own clay body to see the results of those specifics. When you are applying this glaze as well, you want to be mindful that this does not adhere to bisque as a normal glaze would. So you want to, when you apply this product, the drying time is very different than a typical glaze. We would recommend once you apply it to try to fire it as soon as you are able to, just so you don't have any issues with adhesion as this glaze starts to dry onto your bisque. And you want to be very mindful of how you transport your piece, so that way you're not breaking anything off, moving your piece from point A to point B. So this is our Ritual Glaze by Mayco, our white Melt Gloop. Here you have an image of how you are able to apply our Melt Gloop, either in this dot pattern or the drips here. You can also see our AP certification. This product is not recommended for dinnerware due to surface texture. Here on the other side, you're going to see some basic application tips, suggestions. If you've never used this product before, we also have a QR code here for more information. This will take you to our website where you can see additional pieces and examples fired to different temperatures and some additional tips if this is your first time using this sort of product. Okay, so here I have the slime green Melt Gloop, and I'm going to show you guys what to expect when you first open the jar. So when you first open this, you'll have the heat seal, and you want to be careful when you open this. Make sure that you don't create a mess for yourself. And these, as you can see, I can flip this like totally upside down and it's not going to go anywhere. This is a very thick product. So you want to make sure when you go to use this initially, you can't shake it like you would a normal container of glaze. So what I would recommend is taking a paintbrush and stirring it with your paintbrush or some kind of stick, just to make sure that you get this homogenized. So you'll take your paintbrush, and again, this is a really thick product, so it's going to take you probably about a full minute to get this mixed. And these glazes have a thixotropic quality to them. So what that means is they kind of develop a skin as they sit in the jar and dry, even with the lid on there. So you want to make sure that any of that skin is mixed fully back into the jar. So I'm gonna go ahead, and that looks pretty good to me. And again, you can see this is super thick. You're gonna get these like peaks in your jar. So I'm gonna clean off my paintbrush, set that to the side. And then when you're going to use this, so first I'm going to show you guys how to apply it. We're going to do a project here where you can do a dot design. So the product that we would recommend for you to use is an applicator bottle. So this right here, when you first open this applicator bottle, you're going to see that this is a sealed tip. So in order to be able to use this, make sure you have a pair of scissors handy. And you want to cut the tip of this. And I would recommend always cutting closer to the tip at the top of this. If you cut too low, you can't go back. So make sure that you're cutting further away first to start. And then you can always check and see how that opening looks. And if you want a little bit more of a wider opening, again, this product is pretty thick, but it also depends on the size of the dots you want to create. So I always start a little smaller and work up if I need to. And then to fill this, you're going to want to squeeze your applicator bottle, and then you're going to dip this section into the glaze. So I'm going to dip that down, and I'm squeezing this. So as I release it, it's going to start to fill this container, and you can kind of squeeze it as it's sitting in there to get more to fill. So this is a pretty messy process, but what you're gonna wanna do is wipe away the tip, and then just to make sure you don't have air trapped in here, you wanna tap it to get that glaze to go to the bottom of the container. And then I like to just take whatever's on my finger, tap that down some more, and you're gonna get a little messy, like I said, but just keep some water and a sponge handy. And after you have this full, you can go in and wipe this guy off and make sure you clean up the threads pretty well, just so that you don't have trouble opening and closing your container. And you can squeeze this and dip it back in here and refill it as many times as you need to until it's fully filled. So just make sure that you do tap it quite a bit. If you don't tap it, you're gonna have issues later where you go to use this applicator bottle and it will spit at you kind of. So we just don't wanna make sure that that's happening. And I'm gonna close this up, move this to the side for now. Okay. And clean off your hands. There is another option you have for an applicator tool to use the Gloop. If you do not prefer the squeezy bottles, you can use a syringe. So here I have, I believe they're called Glaze syringes. And this one specifically comes with a cap, which is really nice because if you want to keep some Gloop in this syringe, you can just put this cap on here to prevent it from drying out. I am gonna take this cap off, and you want to make sure that the plunger of your syringe is all the way down. And it's very similar to how we filled the applicator bottle, but you just want to make sure that this tip of your syringe is down inside of the Gloop, and then you're going to pull this plunger up. And I kind of rock the syringe back and forth, so again, I'm trying not to get any air trapped in here. And then when I pull this out, it's going to be a little messy, but you're just going to wipe that away, put the extra back into your container. You can clean this tip off with a sponge. And then you can use your cap and seal that up till you're ready to use it. And then when you go to store your Gloop and you're done with filling up your applicator, make sure that you kind of tap this. This stops it from getting those peaks inside of the jar. The more peaks you have, the more likely it is to start to dry even in the container. So I would just recommend kind of tapping this to get it to sit evenly in the jar. And then you want to make sure this is screwed on really tight, and then it can go back to your shelf. So to start off, I want to show you guys just a little bit of how this product looks. So here I can show you, this is one of the effects you can get from using the Milk Gloop line. You can get these dots that are raised in texture. Also want to show you guys that the dots, you don't have to just use them as a color pattern, you can use them to create imagery. So on this piece, created a rainbow-like effect with the dots. And here is little flowers. And you can see here that the dots in the center became a little bit larger than pea size, so there was some movement as they fired. So if you want to avoid that, just make sure that you use smaller dots, roughly smaller than about pea sized. You can also apply it in larger dollops on a piece to get runs or like a dripping effect. So we're gonna play around with that today. And also you can kind of melt them together to create these larger drips with a variety of colors within the drip. So here you can see these dots were increasing in size, and you will get longer drips if you fire on a vertical surface. So this was fired standing up, and here you can also see where the dot was originally applied, so the diameter of the dot. With some of our darker colors of Gloop, you may see some body staining, so just keep that in mind. On the back here, these were horizontal lines applied to the piece, and this product, it does not stand up well horizontally on a vertical fired piece. So you'll tend to see these drips and the gloop will start to melt down your piece. It can create some interesting effects, but we recommend, if you're looking for this type of effect, you don't want to apply in lines. Just to show you guys roughly how you want these drips to be applied, show you here with the black. Again, when you're using your applicator bottle, always make sure you shake it a little bit to get the product to go to the tip of your applicator. And so here I'm laying this tile flat just so that I can build up that product a little bit more, because this will eventually be fired vertically, but laying it down does help be able to increase the build of the product. So I'm gonna start and just make one small dot here and increase them in size as I move over. So I'll add a little bit more to this dot and just roughly keep making them larger. And you can increase these in width and in height. So I'm gonna make the diameter of this one a little bit larger and build that up. And this one, make even larger and build that up. Again, this product does have a different drying time than a typical glaze. So as this sits here, it will start to lose this glossy sheen, and that's how you know it's getting close to the point of dryness, but the surface is going to dry quicker than the inside of these larger drops. So if I pick this up right now and try to hold it completely vertically, you're gonna see that these start to move down the piece. So if you're applying larger dollops of glaze like this, you wanna try to keep your piece laying flat so that they have time to dry and adhere to your piece, or you would wanna apply your dollop more on the shoulder of your piece. So for that, you would wanna apply it up here. That way, if you set your piece upright, it has the shoulder to grab onto, and it's not gonna wanna move as much on you before it's fully drying. And so for the lines, again, recommend doing your own testing, but you can increase the width of your lines, making them thinner or wider. And you might be able to get some interesting effects, but also keep in mind you may see that body staining from where this was originally applied. With the black gloop here, you can see where those lines were originally placed and how they've melted and gone down the piece during the firing. Okay. And again, you want to try to fire this as soon as possible. The longer this sits on your shelf and dries, the more issues you may have with adhesion of this glaze to your bisque. So I'm going to show you guys a project that you can do with the melt gloop. This is specifically with the white and blue melt gloop on the bottom of this bowl. The inside here has our blue splatterware glaze. Here I have already applied 2 coats of the blue splatterware that is fully dried. So now we can start working on the back of this piece to apply the dots. So I have my 2 applicator bottles here. I have one for the blue melt gloop, one for the white melt gloop. To start, we're gonna use our blue. I'm gonna open this up. And when you go to apply the melt gloop, this is a very thick glaze, so you wanna kind of motion the glaze down to the tip of your applicator, or else you may get some air pockets that will affect the design. So we're gonna shake this a little bit. And then for this piece here, you can see that they're applied in almost like a domino type fashion. So I'm gonna start with this band down near the rim and then work my way up, keeping that domino-like pattern. The form that I am using today is one of our stoneware bisque shapes, and this is our dessert bowl. And since the glaze on the inside is already dry, I don't have to worry about that smudging or smearing, and that's what I would recommend. And these dots can be a little bit messy. So if you start to see peaks forming when you're applying this, that's okay. They're going to melt and fuse together during the firing. You just want to make sure that the gloop is adhering to the side of the bowl, and you want to try to keep these dots roughly pea-sized or smaller. If you get a little bit larger than pea-sized, especially on a surface like the underside of a bowl, you're going to start to have runs instead of dots. So if you're looking for a dot effect, you want to make sure that you don't get your dots any larger than roughly pea-sized. So now that I have finished applying that domino cascade of these drips with the blue, I'm going to move into using my white gloop. And as you can see on this piece, I applied white gloop on top of the blue drips row by row, alternating. So you'll do the same thing. Make sure that you shake your applicator just to make sure that the gloop is getting to the tip and any air is going to the top. That way you don't have any spitting from your applicator. And then you're just gonna do the same thing and just apply the white right on top of the blue. But again, try to make sure your dots do not increase too much in size. We don't want any runs for this design. We just want drips. So you're just adding a little bit on top just so that those two products can melt together in the firing. You also don't have to wait until this glaze fully dries. You'll notice as you're applying it, it will start to lose some of its glossy sheen. As soon as you see that sheen kind of dissipate, you can go ahead and layer on your next layer of gloop. And then at this point, I've done those first 2 rows. I'm gonna skip a row and then continue to alternate placing the white on top of the blue between rows. You want to be really careful if you're rotating your piece that you don't touch these dots that you've created. If you touch them a little bit too harshly, they do tend to fall off of your piece. So just make sure that you're being cautious when moving your piece with these on there. Here you can see my applicator bottle did that spitting that I was talking about. I had some air trapped in here. So a little bit of that white kind of jumped up above this blue dot. If that happens to you, it's okay. I would recommend just using your thumbnail once it starts to dry and scraping it off. It'll flake off really easy. This product, it will adhere to the side of your piece, but it acts more almost like a clay attaching to bisque. So you just want to be really cautious. If you don't want something to fall off, make sure you don't touch it. And so I'll wait for that little speck of white to dry a little bit more before I try to remove that. But this is what we're looking like now that I have all those dots applied. And when you transport this to your kiln to fire, you want to be really cautious that you do not touch these dots or they will fall off and you'll have to reapply them. So just make sure that you're not touching them in the process of moving your piece from one place to another. And the results on this piece today were fired to cone 6. These examples here today, they are fired on our stoneware bisque forms, our wavy mug. And these pieces did have dollops of the gloop applied. This one here was applied on the raw clay. And this one, the black and white gloop, was applied over top of the speckled buff engobe. For our engobes, we do recommend that you bisque fire the engobe onto the form before adding any additional glaze or the gloop. This will help sometimes when applied in larger dollops. The gloop does have a tendency to want to pull off the engobe. Additionally, the same effect can happen with our underglazes. So we recommend bisque firing an engobe or underglaze onto your piece first before applying the gloop, just to prevent any issues with that pulling off of your piece. When you are applying the gloop to your piece, you can see here that the gloop, when applied on the raw clay or the engobe, it will keep its texture and run down the piece. Here on the inside, this was applied over our black gloss glaze, and you can see that the gloop has a tendency to flatten out and run more into itself. You don't get that raised texture as much when applied to the gloss glaze. That same effect can occur when applied on top of any of our stoneware line of glazes outside of the ritual line. So just keep that in mind, that you may have some different effects depending on how they are layered. So this piece here was bisqued with the speckled buff engobe, and then 2 layers of our black gloss stoneware glaze was applied on the inside and on the handle. And then these drips are the black milk gloop and our white milk gloop. And they were layered to create these multicolored drips. So I'm going to show you how to get that effect here. This here is a piece that we are going to be applying the gloop to. So again, this engobe was bisqued onto the piece, and then the 2 layers of the black gloss glaze were applied on the inside and to the handle already, and they are fully dry. So at this time, we can start to apply our gloop. So for these drips, they were applied in an alternating manner around the rim of the piece. So you want to make sure, if you're applying gloop to the rim of a piece, that it kind of hugs the rim. That way it has something to counterbalance itself and it's not going to fall off on you as easily. So I'm going to hold my syringe, make sure that my finger is on the top of the plunger, and I'm going to apply a dollop of the gloop and have it come a little bit over the edge on the outside, a little bit more so than it does on the inside. So you can see here how it hugs the lip of this cup. And then I'm going to put another dollop next to this of the white. So I'm going to go another space over to apply another dollop of the black and continue that along the rim of this piece. If you run out of gloop in your syringe, no worries, you just refill it and keep moving. Here on this mug, the gloop was also applied to the top and bottom sections of the handle. So I will also be doing that on this piece, allowing it to kind of hug around those connection points. And now, just like I did with the black, I'm going to take my white syringe of gloop, and I'm going to place dots all along the rim, alternating between those black dollops, and make sure that they kind of hug the lip of the piece. If you happen to get any gloop on the outside of your piece where you don't want that, no worries, you just want to take a sponge and clean that up. If you're seeing any peaks in the glaze when applying, don't worry about those. They will melt and fire into the drips as the piece is in the kiln. And now that you have your first layer of these alternating gloop drips on the top, you're going to go back on top of these and apply the opposite color onto these dollops. So I'm going to go around and put black on top of the white dollops now. And you don't have to wait for this product to fully dry before applying your next layer. You'll start to notice that the sheen of this will fade in from glossy to almost satin. And at that point, you can go ahead and apply your next layer of gloop. So these are already starting to dry out that skin that's on there. So you can go ahead and apply your next layer. And now I'm going to go in, and where there is only the one layer of the white around the rim, I'm going to add black on top of that. So I'll do that all the way around. So then they each have 2 layers of gloop. And we're going to keep going with this pattern until we get to 3. That's how we created this effect. When you go to do your third layer, make sure that you're putting the opposite color on top. So everywhere that there is currently black on the top of the drips, I'm going to place white. White will get black on top, and that'll be our final layer. As you build this up, you just want to make sure that you're counterbalancing the weight of these drips. So I'm placing more on the outside, but still trying to place some on the inner edge, just so that way it doesn't want to lean out and fall off of the piece. On the handle connection points, I've already placed the black gloop on the top connection points of the handle, both at the top of where it connects and the bottom. So I'm just going to go in and put a line of white across there so that these will blend into each other. And so now that we have applied all of our melt gloop, you have the 3 layers of melt gloop up top here. This is definitely going to help with adhesion, as I stated before, that it's hugging the lip of your piece. And just make sure that as you're transporting this from wherever you have glazed it and moving it to your kiln, that you're very cautious. As the gloop dries, it does tend to have issues with adhesion. So just make sure that you're not moving it too quickly. Just be very cautious with it. And you want to try to fire this piece as soon as possible, just so that way you don't continue to have issues as this dries. And as you can see here, this finished piece, you can play around with the finished drips. If you have smaller or larger dollops of gloop, you're going to have shorter or longer runs in the glaze. So I encourage you to do your own testing. Have fun. If you have any additional questions or concerns about using our Melt Gloop product, please make sure to scan the QR code on the back of the label of your jar. This will take you to our website, where there will be some additional tips and tricks, additional examples of pieces that you can fire. But we do encourage you to do your own testing. If you have any issues or questions during your testing, please feel free to contact us through our website or through technical support, and have fun with it and make it Mayco.